My name is Diane Mercer. I'm 61 years old, and 3 years ago, on a Tuesday evening in October, my husband of 27 years sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the one we picked out together at a furniture store in 1998, the one our kids did homework on, the one I'd set for thousands of dinners, and told me he was in love with someone else. She was 34. Her name was Kylie. He said it the way people say things they've rehearsed, calm, organized, like he'd been over it so many times in his head that the edges had gone smooth. I didn't cry. Not right then. I just looked at him across that table and thought, he has no idea what I've been doing for the last 3 years. Before I tell you what I mean by that, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city below and the time where you are. I read every comment, every one. Now let me take you back to where this really starts. His name is Richard Mercer. Rick. We met in 1993 at a mutual friend's backyard cookout. He was 31, recently promoted at the engineering firm where he'd been working since college. He had a good laugh. He was steady in a way that felt safe to me then. I was 29, working as an office manager for a small accounting firm, thinking about going back to school, but never quite doing it. We married in 1997, had 2 children, our son Patrick, now 30, and our daughter Melissa, 27. I stopped working full-time when Patrick was born. Rick's career was accelerating, and someone needed to hold everything else together, so I did. That was the arrangement we made, out loud and clearly, with full agreement on both sides. I managed the household, supported his career in all the invisible ways that don't show up on a resume. The dinners he never had to think about, the school calendars he never had to track, the social relationships he never had to maintain. The moves we made twice for his promotions that I packed and unpacked without complaint. I was good at it. I want to be clear about that. I was genuinely good at it, and I didn't resent it. Not for most of those years. What I didn't know, what I was slow to understand, was that Rick had quietly begun to see those things as evidence that I had nothing else. That the woman who managed everything at home was somehow less than the woman he used to know. That somewhere in 27 years of partnership, he'd started to confuse reliability with invisibility. Kylie, I would learn later, was an account manager at a firm his company had recently hired as a vendor. Young, energetic, new, someone who saw him fresh, without the accumulated weight of 3 decades. I understand the psychology of it. I don't say that generously. I say it because understanding something and accepting it are 2 completely different things. The first sign came about 4 years ago. Small things at first. The kind of things you notice and then talk yourself out of. He was working late more often. He'd come home distracted, phone face down on the counter, a habit he'd never had before. He stopped asking about my day, which in itself wasn't unusual. Rick had never been especially curious about my inner life, but the quality of his absence changed. It became pointed, deliberate. Then at a company holiday party, 3.5 years ago, I watched him laugh at something Kylie said from across the room. It wasn't the laugh. It was the way he leaned toward her when he laughed, like gravity had shifted. I drove home that night and sat in the car in the garage for a long time. I didn't confront him, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to think first. I have always been better at thinking than reacting. And that night in the garage, I made a decision. If this was going where I thought it was going, I was not going to be unprepared. I want to be honest with you about something. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I'm not. I didn't want to destroy Rick. I didn't want to humiliate him or take everything he had. What I wanted, what I had been quietly working toward for 3 years before that Tuesday in October, was to make sure that when this moment came, I was standing on solid ground. Because here's what I knew about myself at 55 years old, sitting in that car in the garage. I had spent 27 years building a life around someone else's career. I had no current income, a resume with a 20-year gap, and a set of skills that the world doesn't always know how to value. If Rick walked out tomorrow, I needed to not be starting from zero. So I started building, not loudly, not in a way that would raise questions, just quietly, steadily, the way I've done everything else in my life. The first thing I did was go back to school. Not full-time, just 2 evening classes per semester at the community college, business administration, then accounting fundamentals. I told Rick it was something to keep busy with now that the kids were grown. He nodded and went back to his phone. That was fine. I didn't need his attention. I needed the credits. The second thing I did was reactivate a relationship with my college roommate, Janet Holm, who had spent the last 20 years building a bookkeeping and financial consulting business from her home office. We had dinner. I told her what I was thinking. She said, without hesitation, "I've been waiting for you to call me for 15 years. Janet became my mentor, my business partner in everything but name for the first 2 years. She taught me the software. She walked me through client acquisition. She showed me how to price services, how to structure contracts, how to build a client base through referrals. The third thing I did, and this is the one that would matter most, was open my own business account. Sole proprietorship, Diane Mercer Bookkeeping Services. Registered, licensed, insured. I did not tell Rick. By the time he sat down across from me at that kitchen table in October, I had 22 paying clients, a steady monthly income, a professional reputation, small but real, built entirely on my own name. He had no idea. He finished his speech, that's what it felt like, a speech, and looked at me, waiting. I think he expected tears, maybe an argument, maybe the kind of devastation that would take weeks to manage, that would give him something to feel sorry about while he moved on. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "All right, Rick, call your attorney." He blinked. "What?" "Call your attorney, I'll call mine. We'll proceed." Don't you want to talk about this?" "We can talk through our attorneys." He sat back in his chair. Something moved across his face that I hadn't expected. Not relief, confusion. Like a man who had rehearsed a scene and the other person wasn't following the script. "Diane, I know this is a shock. It isn't, actually." Another long pause. "What does that mean?" I stood up, carried my coffee cup to the sink and rinsed it. When I turned around, I said it calmly and clearly. "It means I've been watching this coming for 3 years, and I've been getting ready." I went upstairs. I heard him sit at that table for a very long time. My attorney's name was Carol Weston, a friend of Janet's as it happened. Family law, 22 years of practice. She had the kind of office where nothing was decorative. Every piece of paper on that desk meant something. I brought her 3 years of documents, business registration, client contracts, income records, a financial summary that Janet had helped me prepare. I also brought something else. During those 3 years, I had quietly educated myself on one specific thing: what a spouse is legally entitled to after a long marriage. In our state, marital assets are subject to equitable distribution. That means the retirement accounts Rick had been building for 27 years, the 401k, the investment portfolio, the pension he'd be eligible for in 4 years, those weren't just his. Those were ours. I also brought Carol a piece of paper I had found 14 months earlier inside Rick's home office, in a folder he had left unlocked in his filing cabinet. A financial statement showing a brokerage account I had never seen before. Not in both our names, his name only. He had been quietly moving money for 2 years. Carol looked at the document for a long time. "How did you find this?" I said. "I was looking for the car insurance renewal." "This changes the conversation significantly," she said. The divorce proceedings took 11 months. I won't walk you through every piece of it because some of it is still legally sensitive. But I'll tell you the shape of it. Rick's attorney came in confident, dismissive even, in the early meetings. The kind of dismissive that told me they had underestimated what I'd brought. They made an initial offer that assumed I had nothing, a settlement built on the idea that I was a woman with a 20-year resume gap and no independent income. Carol put my business financials on the table. Then she put the hidden brokerage account documents on the table. The energy in that room changed. Rick looked at me from across the conference table, and I watched him understand, for the first time, that I had not spent 3 years being sad. I had spent 3 years being prepared. His attorney asked for a recess. They came back 40 minutes later with a different number. The final settlement included my equitable share of the retirement accounts, a fair division of the marital home proceeds, spousal support for 7 years given the length of the marriage and my career sacrifice, and a full accounting of the hidden brokerage account, which was factored into the asset division. I walked out of that building on a gray November afternoon with Carol beside me, and I stood on the sidewalk and just breathed cold air for a moment. She said, "You did well." I said, "He made it easy." I want to stop here for a second, because I know some of you listening to this are in a version of that car in the garage right now, sitting in the dark, knowing something but not knowing what to do with it yet. I want to say this clearly. You have more time than you think, and you have more options than he thinks you have. The years you spent building someone else's life, they count. Legally, financially, practically. They count. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Find an attorney who knows that. Find a Janet. Start the class. Open the account. Do it quietly. Do it steadily. Tell me in the comments, are you going through something like this right now? Or have you? I want to hear from you. Rick and Kylie moved in together 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I don't follow his life. I don't need to. What I know is this. Patrick and Melissa handled it the way adult children handle these things, with complicated love for both parents and a clear-eyed understanding of what had happened. I didn't tell them details. I didn't need to plant anything. They had watched their father for years too. They had drawn their own conclusions. Melissa called me the week the divorce finalized. She said, "Mom, I just want you to know, we see you." I had to set the phone down for a minute. Janet and I formalized our partnership 8 months after the divorce. Holm and Mercer Financial Services. We have 41 clients now. I work from home, which I have set up exactly the way I want it. A proper office in what used to be the guest room, good light, quiet mornings, coffee I make for myself at exactly the time I want it. I am 58 years old in this story. I'm 61 now, and I want to tell you what 61 feels like when you built it yourself. It feels like waking up in the morning in a house that is entirely yours, making decisions that no one has to approve, spending an evening doing exactly what you want, and being accountable to no one for it. It feels like, and I don't have a better word for this, it feels like being legible to yourself again. Like after years of being someone's backdrop, you've stepped into the frame. I don't think Rick is a monster. I think he made choices that revealed who he was, and I think he underestimated who I was. That second part, that was his mistake, not mine. The table is still in the garage. I was going to donate it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Some mornings I walk past it on the way to my car, and I think about that Tuesday in October, when he sat across from me and waited for me to fall apart. I think about what I said. Call your attorney. I'll call mine. And I think that might be the best sentence I've ever spoken. If you're listening to this, and you feel like you gave everything to something and have nothing left, I want you to hear me. You have more than you know. You built more than they see. Start with one thing, one class, one phone call, one account in your own name, One conversation with a woman who's been where you are. That's how it begins, quietly, without announcing it. And one day, you'll sit across from the person who underestimated you, and you'll say something calm and clear, and you'll watch them realize, too late, exactly who they were dealing with. That's my story. If it helped you, share it. Subscribe if you haven't, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you're building.